There's still loads of places where C++ is vital.
Relearn C++ by example.
I'll be honest with you, I wrote it for me. I partly wrote it for my husband and people like him who used to do C++ full time, have moved away to other languages, because it's good to mix things up, and then tried to come back and gone, it's moved. How do I catch up?
The Introduction to C++ book.
It's hard to find a newer one that's based on modern standards.
I read, not the book, but the table of content, which was before page 100, so
Yep.
that's cool.
Focus.
And
good.
chapter 3, like, blew my mind. Welcome to The Curious Developer. I'm Jesper Pedersen from KDAB, and today I have with me nobody less than Frances Buontempo.
Hello.
Thank you for being on the show. Frances has written a book called
Learn C++.
You're supposed to say re. Relearn C++ by example. That's what she at least is running around saying that it should have been called. We can talk a bit about that. She is currently writing a book, Introduction to C++, which is, well, we'll talk about that book also. It's going to be on O'Reilly.
That's right.
So, just a few years ago, it was, could you spell C++? You had a job right away. Seems to be less so these days with, well, who needs programmers, they claim. So, are we late to the party here with an introduction to C++? Is that even a good language to start learning? Or who should be learning C++ these days?
We might be late to the party, but there's still an interest. It's still being used in various industries. I think some of the big American companies have been laying off some of the more junior staff who are using C++. Some people are switching to other languages like Rust. But Anthony Williams gave a keynote yesterday at Meeting C++. He's working in the automotive industry. There's still loads of places where C++ is vital, and it is frequently in embedded things. Almost everything, the cameras around us and all the rest, might well have some microprocessors using C++. So it's still relevant. Is it the first language you'd learn? There are other languages that are easier to learn. But sometimes if you try hard thing first, it makes the easier thing seem even easier. Yep. I think it's worth knowing some languages that take you down closer to the metal, as it were. You get a better understanding how other things are working. So it's worth doing the hard things just in and of themselves. Yeah. And then you learn how to think about some of the other things. So I think it's still worthwhile. People have said there's replacements to C++ since it began. I remember like 20 years ago, people saying, oh, Java, no one's going to do C++ anymore because Java's garbage collected. You can't have memory leaks in Java. Wrong, you can. So Java can be better for some things. I mean, it's fine. And it is a great, C++ is a great language. All languages have got pros and cons. C++ is hard to learn because it's such an old language. It keeps growing, so it's huge, so nobody can learn all of it. But hopefully my books draw a thread through to see you learn some salient bits, enough to be able to go on and learn more after.
I'm curious now that you mentioned C++ is not the easiest to start learning and so on, and there are other languages out there, and right away came in my brain my first programming language, and I was just curious, what was the first programming language you learned?
Basic, on my dad's BBC machine.
High five on that one.
Oh yes, games, that's what it was all about. Space Invaders.
Ah, yeah.
I typed in the source code from a magazine and I couldn't get a very high score. And I knew that I had 3 lives, so I remembered where all the number 3s were, guessed which one was the number of lives, I gave myself 99 and got a massive score.
I don't think that's how reverse engineering works, but
Well, I was 14, it works
Reverse
good enough to get a
engineering 14.
higher score, so yeah.
the relearn or learn C++ by example, you emphasis and just for the viewer there at home that doesn't she sound a bit strained in her voice? She just came out of a 2-hour-long session. We're here at Meeting C++ right now, and that was the keynote she was referring to from yesterday. It's not going to be yesterday your timeline, but hey, that's cool. Hopefully when this come out, we'll still have a job and computers hasn't won and whatever. But also hopefully the your presentation will be out so people can watch that. That was a great presentation. I
Thank
heard
you.
in the hallway afterwards, lots of people talking about it. So that at least is a good thing when you go into the hallway after your presentation, or when I do them, I sneak into the toilet, sit there, listen to anybody. Might just be me. Let's not go there.
Let's not.
But relearn C++. That you said that multiple times. Why is that important? And who was that book for? Who is it for, I guess?
I'll be honest with you, I wrote it for me. So I've been reviewing books for Manning publishers for quite a while, and I just reviewed a book about C.
Okay.
And I thought, he's reminding people of old stuff and showing people some of the newer C standards. I'm aware of all the stuff in C++ I don't know. If I were to write a book, it would give me an excuse to spend time practicing some of the things I haven't played with. So I pitched the idea at them, thinking they'll say no, but then I've got a personal project to keep me entertained. They said yes. So I kind of committed myself at that point. I suggested some things I did know how to do, and some things I hadn't actually tried, like coroutines. So it was an excuse to play with some things myself that I didn't know very well. So I mainly wrote it aimed at me to give me a chance to practice things. And I partly wrote it for my husband and people like him who used to do C++ full time, have moved away to other languages, because it's good to mix things up, and then tried to come back and gone, it's moved. How do I catch up?
Where's my pointers?
There are loads of huge books about each standard that are thousands of pages that by the time you finish reading that book, there'd be a new standard. And there wasn't a book that was quite short that just gave you some salient bits that are quite useful from each of them to just catch you up from C++ 11. So partly wrote it for me and people who had got left behind and lost their confidence, who had spent years learning and getting really good, and then went, but I don't know about structured bindings or some small new things. So I'm like, this is just syntactic sugar. You can learn this. I've tried to just encourage myself and other people who felt like they'd fallen off the latest knowledge and needed to relearn things. But the publisher didn't like relearn. It didn't sound compelling enough. So it's just the official title was just Learn C++, but it is for people who have done it before.
Introduction to C++.
Yeah.
That's a very general title. That's one of those that is, when you sort it alphabetically, it'll be early on so that you beat the other ones.
Well, if I'd just called it C++, it would have been even earlier if you'd done it in ascending alphabetical order, of course.
But why an introduction to C++? Don't we have enough of those?
Do we? Name some. There are a few.
Bjarne had written only this big.
Yeah. I mean, he's written several overview books and some detailed books. So yeah, and of course, buy his first, read his first. I'm doing this because I was asked to do it, partly. Guy called Klaus Eagleberger reached out to me and said he'd just reviewed a proposal for O'Reilly doing an introductory C++ book, and it was going to start with pointers and C and build up from there. And he said, no, hang on, why don't you ask Frances if she'll do it? So they did, and here we are.
Yeah,
it's a challenge. There are some other books. I think Bjarne's books are obviously very good, but some of them you might need some programming experience first. As it happens, I've ended up assuming you've got some programming experience. I think there are a lot of books out there on specific standards, things like that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to find a newer one that's based on the modern standards. Yeah, obviously, read all Bjarne's books, they're great.
Well, I
was asked.
sorry, Bjarne. This is not. Well, he has the smaller version that are, but the thicker ones. Like, personally, I admitted earlier today my timeline in the interview with Ivan. I admitted I only read the first 100 of any book, so I got like a whole bookshelf of books that I read the first 100 pages. I don't know why, but that's how far I get before I lose.
Reading a technical book is hard work. I talked briefly in the keynote this morning about reading a book. And I used to do a handbag test. If it wouldn't fit in my handbag, not happening. I don't usually carry around handbags anymore since I've become an independent consultant, so it doesn't work. But one of my favourite technical books, the first one I ever read, was Koenig and Richard's C programming language.
Yeah.
And I think that's 179 pages.
I only read the first 100.
Yeah, but you read over half of it, right? And there are a lot of technical books that are well over 1,000 pages. If you pick it up, half the pages fall out, and you know you're not going to get to the end of it. But it's hard work to make things shorter. It's a famous quote from a mathematician about, sorry, this letter's so long, but I didn't have time to make it shorter. And it is hard to be concise.
Yeah. Teaching people that are new to programming is a very difficult task. Or is this book for people new to programming, or are they supposed to know Python level 17 or?
I'd originally tried to make it for people who didn't know programming, but that's too hard. So I have explained the basics of a for loop,
right,
and variables. And of course, in C++, you can have constant variables. And a sentence or two has taken some reworking there to explain what on earth a constant variable is. Sounds like an oxymoron, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not assuming that you know any specific programming language.
Okay.
I think you'll be all right if you haven't programmed, but it might be easier if you've had a little bit of a go.
Or just be one of those really bright kids that can pick up anything.
Well, then you can learn despite how bad the teacher is. Again, I'll refer you to my keynote this morning.
Yeah, I often mentally go back to an old clip on the internet with some kids that are being asked by their dad to write a recipe for how to make a peanut butter sandwich. And he does exactly what they write. So put the knife into the peanut butter. And he takes a knife and not with the sharp edge down, just like, boop. Like, no, Dad, you're doing it wrong again on purpose. And it's like, I have it on my desktop at home. Every time I sit there and I feel a bit blue, it's like, take a look at that. You cannot just, it's a beautiful clip.
Yeah. I think there's a quote from Donald Knuth that says something along the lines of explaining stuff to people is hard, but explaining it to a computer really proves you understand it. Computers do exactly what they're told.
Or they will tell you missing semicolon on line 233.
Or you've got undefined behavior, and then they go, stuff you, I'm not putting that.
Hey, that was undefined behavior.
I saw the demons, but they unconventionally came out of the ears rather than your nose, but that's allowed.
Let's get back to your book, though.
Yes, okay.
Yes, the Introduction to C++ book. I read, not the book, but the table of contents, which was before page 100. So
yep.
that's cool.
Focus.
And it started with Hello World. And
of course,
you would definitely be thrown out of the community if you did not start with Hello World. Then it talks about variables and I/O.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I mean, it's difficult to talk about programming with it. Variables and I/O.
Yep.
I/O is a good thing for interacting with your computer. So, like, yeah, easy peasy. When it's going to be at pointers, well, not there. But chapter 3, like, blew my mind. Exception handling. That was definitely not in my introduction to any programming languages. Should it have been, and why is it in yours?
So some other people have given feedback and gone, whoa, wasn't expecting that soon. But I had considered doing it later on because it seems like a hard topic. However, then we would have built up loads of examples of code that weren't dealing with problems, and I would have had to have then revisited it or said at the time, of course, this might go wrong. And if you're getting people to try programs, and through the book, I try and encourage them to give some invalid input, think about things that go wrong, write some tests. Explaining what's happening with exception handling and the stack pointer jumping around is hard. So glossed over the details a bit, but gave you the idea that we'd be here in the stack, and then we might move somewhere else if we throw an exception. And therefore, I deliberately introduced the new topic of standard expected, which doesn't jump around.
23,
It's
right?
either got, yes, that's right, 23. You've either got the happy path or something went wrong, which could be an error code or a string. So that doesn't need to explain the jumping around stuff, and introduced a new thing quite early on. But it felt like it would have been even more jumping around if I hadn't brought in the exception handling till later on. And you said you read the chapter, does it work all right? Some of the feedback was like, this is unconventional, but actually it sort of fits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you are doing any programming, if you look at any program that has been around for more than 10 seconds, you will find if this weird thing happened, then do this otherwise. And I love talking to people that's like, yeah, our code base is 5 million lines of code. It's so bloated. We should totally rewrite it. Like, you know that every single of those if statement in there, there's a reason for them, that they might not be too valid today. There might be things that are not even true anymore. But at least you should be considering that all of these, there might be a bug hidden behind them, and focusing early on. I would say yes to focus early on not only the sunny day scenario.
Yeah, things go wrong sometimes, so think about it. Yeah, definitely unconventional choice, but I might have got away with it.
Well, we'll know in a few years. An introduction book. This book will get you through all of C++. It will not fit in your handbag though.
Correct.
So will this book fit in your handbag? Did you buy a new handbag for this book?
It's cruising around 328 pages at the moment. I wanted to keep it under 300, but it's got slightly out of hand. I'm actually quite pleased that it's only just over 300. Once things hit beyond 350, then it's like that. I've committed 6 months of my life to reading each evening and weekend. It's bigger than I wanted, but as I'm going through the feedback, I'm finding some ways to summarise things. And then drawing some other pictures, so it's shrinking and growing, shrinking and growing. But I think 325 mark.
I was about to ask for the font size. 300 pages in font size 2 is still a lot.
Yes, I have no control over that. So.
Yeah. How far will it take people? Where do you leave them? When I'm done reading your book, I have 2 minutes of Python programming, so I know loops and variables and whatnot, and then I read your book. Where will I be in the world?
Well, if you only get up to page 100, as discussed, then you'll know about input, output, and some error handling. Cover files, but that's really like using standard ints. You've got all the streams, you've got different ways of doing things. Look at generating random numbers, because actually knowing how to do some randomness means you can write some code that behaves differently, and you get to play with things. Playing with things is good fun. Yeah. There's some more advanced topics like coroutines and threading that I've not touched on. So there's a whole chunk of stuff I've not got anywhere near. Give allocators a passing mention, but we don't go into those. So things like allocators and threading and some hardcore stuff not gone into. But yeah, input, output files, random numbers, exception handling, and C++ trying to do object-oriented programming. You need quite a few mechanisms in place. I'll show you about unique pointers. We do mention C-style raw pointers, but I encourage you to use smart pointers instead. And then we look at special member functions, and do you want to be able to copy a structure or not, and what's a move, R value semantics, all that kind of stuff. So all the boilerplate stuff you need around the OOPs in there, but that does take 3 or 4 chapters. And then go sideways and look at standard variants instead as a different way of doing things. So I give you alternatives, which is quite hard for beginners. But C++ now has got so many different ways of doing things. So I think you'll have enough to do some quite big programs. And I gradually build up an example of a fake trading game thing that comes out of prices that might come from files or random numbers, and you either buy or sell, and builds things up.
I watched a presentation, CPP on C or something like that, from Nikolai Yusotus, where he was talking about polymorphism in C++, and he was talking about the regular polymorphisms. We've all been taught when you and I were kids about pointers and virtual and whatnot, and then he said, okay, let me show you another way, and very few people in the audience, including me, was surprised of the other way, which was a Stutz variant that you could polymorph with. And the thing that struck me the most from that presentation was that he then turned to the audience and said, what would you teach newcomers to C++ first? The one with pointers or the one with Stutz variant? I was like,
He asked the audience which one they preferred. I was in that talk. And I put my hand up for doing variants second because I was in the middle of writing those chapters and I've written all the OOP stuff first. No, Nico deliberately needles people to get them thinking, which I love. His talks are great. He's right. With his examples, you could use either way. And there's much less boilerplate required for the standard variant. You use the visitor pattern to vary what you're doing. And recently we've got standard visit in C++, which just works for you. Years ago, there were loads of books about implementing the visitor pattern yourself. Oh my, there's an interesting history lesson. Standard variant, you tell it what the types are. So you've got a fixed set of types when you compile your code. With classes, you have a base class, and in your business logic, you call the trade function or the buy function or the sell function or whatever. And if you want a new type, you just add a new CPP file. It doesn't touch what you've already got. Compile, bosh. If you want to add to your variant, you need to put that new type in your variant and everything recompiles. So the variant's fine for a fixed set of types. So closed set of types. And actually you can add a different visitor and have different behavior. Fixed set of types, add behavior. Classes, fixed base class, so fixed behavior, but you can add different classes. So it's solving different problems.
I know Nico was trying to
get us talking.
Yeah.
It worked.
But I think there's also a key point in that what you learn the first is the thing that sticks with you. And we all by now, hopefully, some knows that there are troubles with raw pointers and doing it the other way around. If that's the default thing that you take out of the toolbox, I don't know. Anyway, teaching. You did a 2-hour, an hour and a half talking about teaching and learning.
In my defense, I talked for an hour. I got half an hour of questions afterwards. Well, I actually talked for an hour and 5 minutes. I overran a little bit, but as you were.
It felt like 2 hours. I did not say that. I did.
Oh, it felt
I'm
like a day.
such a gentleman, huh?
It felt like more than 2 hours, mate.
Yeah, no, I was referring to all the knowledge I got out of it. Of course, I could have. Okay. Anyway, first of all, I would like to bring forward one of my own observations there. I've been doing 100 trainings, 97 by now, of 5 days training. So I had a lot of repetitive, trying the same one again and again, which is the coolest thing about doing trainings. You can actually practice if you do it. It's the like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to just repeat the same thing I told before. I'm going to try and learn from my first iteration or my 20th iteration of where did I actually get people and so on. But there was one book that has been with me ever so long, and it's from 2005, I believe. During your presentation, I was once sitting with my phone, but that was because I gotta tell Fran about this book. It was and let me just check my note here so I don't get it wrong. It's Donnie Templin, 2006, called Laugh and Learn. I absolutely love it, and anybody who's doing presentations out there should go and fetch that one. It has one episode in there that so her background. She was a stand-up comedian, and that didn't go well, likely not to her expectation of how much she wanted to make and when she wanted to work and whatnot. So at the end, she ended up working for a company that was training, quote unquote, people that lost their driver's license because of something they were not supposed to be doing. And these aren't exactly, that's Donnie's word here, the most people that takes a training the best. Like, oh, let me learn. That's interesting. Like, that was that copper. He did not. So, and she still had to go through. So she was trying very hard to see what worked with these people and trying to reflect on that. And in there, her very last chapter in the book is how to tell a joke. And she says, this book here is not about being funny. It's about being playful. And I absolutely love that. I mean, doing these interviews here, I am sure there's, so thumbs up if you think that I'm funny, and thumbs up if you think that she's doing good presentations. Now we're going to get some thumbs up and we can interpret themselves. But that's not funny. That's playful. That people did not expect me to say thumbs up for both of these. That's playful and doing presentations like that, and all of a sudden it's like, now everybody's like, what is Jesper about to say? It must be important. He stopped, and I saw a lot of that I heard a lot of that from your presentation.
Yeah, I like to try and get people thinking, and I guess the thing about a keynote is you've got free reign. You can ask big questions there, whereas for the individual talks that people are expecting and want some technical input and some training from that. I think for a keynote you get free reign to ask, what is AI? Is it even intelligent? Oh, who knows? What does intelligence mean?
So I'm keen to hear from you. We by now we have a few millenniums of experience of teaching each other. Some are like, can you next week there's a meeting here. You just tell people about that new subsystem that you've been working on. And it's like the deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
I mean. But at least as a society, we have learned and have reflected upon this. But one of the new things, relatively speaking, obviously, is learning online. What is your thought on that? How would you go around? I mean, I've been pondering a lot of what does work from my toolbox. When you sit there, you teach people half of the screens are black because they couldn't be bothered turning on their screens. Likely because they don't want to bother everybody else with their cat walking over the keyboard, but possibly equal likely because they're just reading the email and don't give about what you're talking about.
I tend to leave my screen off, and I find everyone's screens on really distracting, so I'm watching other people's cats and not listening to the person talking. I'd rather everyone's screens are off. But that's the thing, that everyone's different and different things work for people. I think each time a new text come out, there's been dissenters who've gone, this is terrible. I mean, when they first started publishing books, people said, women might read books. Imagine what will happen. Their brains will explode. So, like, that was, and then the internet, it's full of recipes for bomb making. This is terrible. So technology, like a hammer, it can be a good thing or a bad thing. It depends how you use it. I think that things like automatically generated questions will tend to always end up just being multiple choice ones, because then you can mark them. If you were to get someone to show the steps in their working for solving a maths problem, trying to get a computer to automatically mark that is really difficult. So we do have a tendency at the moment to do what's easiest, and that isn't necessarily the best thing to do. Multiple choice questions, it'll give you a percentage. But if you make a mistake partway through, you get the wrong answer, no points. But you might have been 3/4 of the way there, and so you're losing out on some discussion possibilities on things. So it can be useful, and you can use some of the technologies in new ways. But yeah.
One of the things that I took away from your presentation today was do not ask people to raise their hand if they understood it, or if they didn't understand it, but ask them to raise their hand if they did understand what had been taught. And I mean, trivial thing, but nevertheless. Yeah. And it's about connecting with people. It's about just trying to look into your brain to see if you understood what I was trying to say to you. Not because, again, your word, not mine, not because that you're stupid, but because that I'm stupid in trying to explain something to you. I did not manage to use your frame of reference. I was using my frame of reference, and obviously everybody knows what a variable, even a constant one, is, but you just don't understand how things that are variable can be constant. And I did not see that when I was, but it's a connecting part. And that's what I'm trying to get to. You turn off your monitor so that or not your monitor, your video camera, so you do not distract people. But if I'm teaching you and you turn it off, how can I see when you are zoning out? Because like,
Yeah. I mean, I've given some online talks, and then you can't see the 100 people with their cameras on. You like sit there and you go, I feel like I'm talking to myself. There's no one here. I'm sat in my study in front of my PC. I am talking to myself, but then some questions will pop up in the chat or things, and that is strange. And you've lost input variable to process when people's cameras are off. And the people want different things. But you can set ground rules and say, well, I want everyone's camera on. And if you fall asleep or your cat walks across screen, that's fine. That's fine. If you don't like it, I'm sorry, tough. That's what we're doing in this class.
Oh, my camera died. I'm sorry. Yeah.
There's always someone.
In your presentation today, you showed that you have a certificate at home, that you could code your way out of a wet paper bag. I think I will appreciate that idea, and I will give you a certificate that you survived an interview with Jesper. I can even sign it for you, but I also thought that, where is it? Here it's I survived an interview with Frances, so I got one too.
Hooray! Well done.
And I'll take it with me home and remember this interview. Thank you very much for meeting me, and it was very interesting.
It's been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.